Everyone to the Things Industries webinar on smart cities, utility metering, municipality management, and enterprise LoRaWAN setups, which we can actually scale to large numbers. I think we have already one of our two guests who will join me here. Let's welcome Rolf to the stage to say hi as well. Hi, Rolf.
Hi there. Hello.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very well. I'm very well. It's nice and hot here in the UK for a change.
Same. Where in the UK are you calling from today?
Calling from Wimbledon in London. So looking forward to the tennis starting in a couple of weeks' time.
Great. That's a really good call. I'm today at the headquarters of the Things Industries here in Amsterdam. So I think every weather is typically coming first through you and then arriving here in Amsterdam. So anything else? Yeah, it's great to have you here today. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Felix Heinz. You've seen the banner already. I'm part of the commercial team at the Things Industries based here in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where the rest of our team is as well. We're expecting another guest, Andy, who will join us a little later, I guess. And then let's see, Ralph, could you give us a quick introduction? Who are you? And then maybe take over already with introducing Connexin and the project we're actually working on together.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much for inviting me to join you on this webinar. Absolutely delighted to be here. So I am the Chief Growth Officer for Connexin. So anything and everything to do with sales, marketing, partnerships, growth, business development, etc. And also I wear the second hat of being the MD of the IoT business unit. So by way of short introduction, Connexin is a company that has just celebrated its 16th birthday. It's born and bred in Hull, the northeast of the UK. And very proudly from that area. It's always been in telecommunications of some sort. And today, half the business is essentially as an altnet. We provide fiber directly to people's homes to provide them with broadband and also to businesses. And one of the things that we're doing on the fiber side is we're breaking the monopoly that has existed in Hull and East Riding, an area of the country that's actually had a monopoly, strangely enough, still for the last 30 odd years. So we're giving residents and businesses of Hull and East Riding the choice that they've been denied for that long, so that they can actually have an alternative and very, very fast and fantastic service from the fiber side. So that's one side of the business. The other side of the business is Internet of Things, and I am assuming that is what you want me to mostly talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, we have a lot of people. I've seen some of the registries, some of the participants. A lot of them are known names who have been around and know the Things Industries and the Things Network for a while. We've just had a press release together with Connexin on a large IoT project, LoRaWAN project. And so today, what I would really like to elaborate on and hope the audience will benefit from it is to explore what is this large project? How do you get there, right? Like, how can we replicate it? Of course, we're talking about LoRaWAN as a technology today. And from our input and from our discussions, and obviously also from the audience's questions, we hope to get a mostly like an actionable set of steps on how you could also start with a LoRaWAN project. Again, we're talking in our project, I think it was 150,000 devices, which is of course like a massive scale to start with. It doesn't need to be that. But yeah, before we go into that, for Connexin as such a prestigious company, so experienced already, I mean, LoRaWAN only arrived halfway through the company's history.
Yep.
What role has LoRaWAN played for you and the business?
Well, so as a full end-to-end IoT service provider, we are putting ourselves in the position of trying to make sure that we are at the center of what companies are trying to do what local authorities, health authorities and utilities are doing from an Internet of Things perspective. So the market's quite fragmented. You have network providers, lots of different technologies. You have platform providers, some of whom specialize in certain specific sort of use cases, and then you have general IoT platforms, and then of course there are just myriad providers of various different sorts of meters, sensors, cameras, etc. that can be used. So what we're doing is essentially bridging all of that, pulling all of that together as an end-to-end solution provider. Now we talk about network of networks, and as you've heard, we provide fiber to businesses and to customers. We also provide Wi-Fi in a number of areas. So we talk about being able to provide Internet of Things in a network of networks way. However, LoRaWAN as a technology lends itself to IoT in a way that no other network technology does. Something like sort of 70–80% of the use cases around the sensors that can be used are essentially for LoRaWAN, and there's very good reason for that, particularly in the utility space around water, which we'll come onto in a minute. But LoRaWAN, clearly has many advantages over other network technologies. We felt that that was the right technology to roll out for customers. And we're doing that for many customers across the country, and we're starting to actually ensure that we've got network coverage across large parts of the country in order to be able to roll out some of these very large projects. As you say, the first phase of the win that we've had with Severn Trent Water is 150-ish thousand water meters, which is a large number, but actually it's a very small number of the total potential that there could be across the whole of their area. So you need to have a network infrastructure that's going to be able to cope with the use case and is going to be able to scale and grow with the client and the use cases to deliver what not just Severn Trent and the water companies need, but also the local authorities, health authorities and businesses that will also be able to make use of it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, you touched on a lot of different interesting points. So as you have the option, let's say, to pick from different technologies, while the Things industry is exclusively working with LoRaWAN, if you're being approached by a potential customer or an existing partner and they are looking into the application, what does the project process look like for you to choose a technology, and what would you say is always the winning factors for LoRaWAN?
Well, I think if you look at the typical use case and the typical types of sensors that are out there, you're taking data from the outside world. As we know, we're measuring all sorts of things like temperature, humidity, motion. Those sorts of sensors are taking those little packets of data, and those little packets of data can easily be transferred across a long-range, low-power network architecture in a very safe and secure and cost-effective way. Now, if you have something that's really bandwidth hungry, if you've got cameras with lots of data, well, clearly you're going to need something which is different to LoRaWAN. But when we're talking about the sorts of sensors that we are deploying, the sorts of water meters for the utilities, we're talking about readings at a predefined frequency, and those readings are not large in terms of the amount of data that's being transferred. So you don't need to have something that is hugely bandwidth orientated. You need to have something that's going to get the job done. The most important factor is that LoRaWAN will enable you to preserve battery life. Mm-hmm. So let's take Severn Trent as an example. So they're moving from what's called AMR, advanced meter reading, way of reading the meters by driving around in a van and collecting wirelessly the readings from those meters. They're now moving into the next phase, and in fact, most of the water companies in the UK are looking to move into that next phase. So they're moving into the phase of AMI water metering, so advanced meter infrastructure. That means water meters that are always connected to the network and are transmitting the data on a preset frequency, let's say every hour. Now, a water meter in the UK, as opposed to other countries, in the UK, they are in chambers under the ground. There are metal lids on top of them. Not the best environment generally for radio frequencies, for the penetration and all the rest of it, to be able to transmit that data. So that's a challenge in itself. And then you've got the other added element, which is that the water meters are going to have batteries in them, because you're not going to plug your water meter into a mains electricity supply. Could be a bit dangerous. So the water meters have got the batteries in. The batteries need to last a very long time, because the amount of capex investment that's required by the water company to put those meters in the first place, and the disruption that it causes in doing that by actually installing them, is quite significant. So they need to make sure that those water meters are in place for a very long time. And the best way to conserve battery is to have a low power network, sending small packets over on predetermined frequency, and ensuring that it's done in the most optimal way, such that this can happen and that the batteries can last for a minimum of 12 years, up to 15 years is what they're looking for. You can't do that on some other cellular technologies, despite what the mobile companies will tell you can. We know that because we have done a lot of testing with our customers and also water meter manufacturers on the requirements for what the spreading factor needs to be in order to ensure that you've got that meter reading happening, but at a level which means that your battery is going to hit that minimum 12 to 15 year time period. You can't do that, as I say, despite what you might get told, with some other technologies. So LoRaWAN is absolutely perfect for this as a use case.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Like you touched again, like on many interesting points here that we see the same thing, right? And feedback not only from you but other projects. So LoRaWAN is a technology which can support long ranges. It has great penetration. It preserves battery on the devices quite well. Yes, it cannot do a lot of data at a time, but small packages. But with these small packages and the technology allows you for very long battery life, and it is definitely a resilient technology which can be deployed in industrial or even sensitive use cases like water meters, where you don't want to interrupt someone's water supply every year or every other year to change a battery, to change a water meter. Yeah, it's really nice. I think I see already here in the chat, like we get some greetings from Cambridge, from Edinburgh, where it's allegedly sunny. So that's it's an quote, so I'm not sure what that means, if that's more of a sarcastic input.
It's sunny everywhere in the UK at the moment. I know Al. So hello, Al. Nice to see you on here. It's good to know that it's sunny in Edinburgh as well.
Exactly. Jose in Barcelona has an easier game there. We have Brazil and Miami there. The Things Industries, Ben is, of course, also here from Germany, Berlin. So it's nice that it's filling up. And again, throughout the webinar, this is a webinar for the audience, so please ask your questions. If you have anything you would like us to elaborate on, that's super welcome and possible to do that. Great, we get already 2 questions. I will collect those and let me present a little bit what the Things Industries does in this end-to-end setup. And then that as a basis we can use for the second half of the webinar, where we go over questions, where we discuss a bit on a step by step on how we can get projects of larger sizes implemented as a takeaway for everyone joining us today. Great. I will share my screen and show a couple of slides. This will be only 5 minutes. So briefly introducing the Things Industries, in what space are we in? Ralph already outlined it. Like a typical LoRaWAN setup. And I know there is a lot of experts here, but there might be some who are curious about what LoRaWAN is. So very briefly over it. On the left, we see an end node, so a device which typically has a sensor. That sensor transmits its reading via LoRaWAN. These messages are being emitted and being received by any gateway or concentrator with it, which is within reach of that sensor. As Ralph pointed out, LoRaWAN has really nice long-range advantages. Plus, it penetrates objects like metal lids, walls, so we can definitely also connect water meters or any other assets in basements, or maybe there is like some a sewer system which we want to reach as well, which might not be possible with other radio technologies. These concentrators then take this encrypted message and forward it to a network server. It's a piece of software which can be running on a local server or in the cloud, where the network server will facilitate the overall network, knowing which gateways belong to me, which devices belong to that network. It has keys, so the encrypted message which was sent by our sensor via the gateway can be decrypted and then formatted. And then the network server would take that formatted message in a JSON format. For example, JSON is one possible format, but that will be readable and very much some standard within this application, IoT application realm. So the network server would integrate with an application server, whatever that is, via TCP, IP, and forward that information. The entire end-to-end path can go backwards as well. So for example, if we decide that the water meters need to be configured to send more often or less often their readings, there is definitely a possibility that you could schedule downlinks, so messages from the application to the network server to the gateway, and then emit that to the sensors, which can be usually reconfigured or configured via downlink messages. The Things Industries does exactly that bit between the application server and the gateway. So the LoRaWAN network server, we run a cloud-hosted managed LoRaWAN network server. I split up a couple of those components which we need to facilitate and manage our network. So it's an identity server, join server, which allows us to create session keys, which is a security measure within the LoRaWAN protocol. And then, of course, if we go to the right, we have integrations via webhooks, so HTTP or MQTT, or we have a few actually of generic integrations to IoT platforms, which would allow you to set up this end-to-end solution quite quickly. Big step, which is the outer layer here, is the monitoring. Because you can imagine if you have one gateway for testing on your desk, that's not a problem. But yes, if we roll out for an entire council, even though 150,000 units is small to the total amount of water meters, it's still quite a large setup to monitor and operate. If anything goes wrong, we would like to see this way in advance before it actually affects the service we're providing to the end user. The Things Industries has always had the community a community approach. Yes, we run private commercial LoRaWAN networks, or the network server for private commercial networks, but we also provide our service as a community edition. So anyone who wishes to connect a gateway and a sensor can do so via our community network. You can see here every black dot on the globe represents one connected gateway. We see here also the Ireland cluster, which devices or gateways are sending data to. So you can already see there is around 150,000 people who are using that community service, which is really nice because we get people who understand LoRaWAN, who explore LoRaWAN as a comparably new technology, and who gain experience in using it. Which is really great, and it's also great to have a critical community to feedback any ideas, approaches, etc. So that's something we use and are happy to be part of as part of providing the network server cloud service. One great thing as well is now you want to select devices. So what we've done is we have a device repository, and with the Things Industries, you're part of a LoRaWAN ecosystem. We have compiled a repository, so a list of LoRaWAN devices, which are with templates already available in our software, so you don't have to enter a lot of details by yourself, but you can fall back, select the device you find here, and then add it into the network. It saves you definitely some time and maybe some headaches in trying to understand what parameter is. In next step, we have integrations. Same thing, you see here already there is custom webhooks, which would allow you to set up an HTTP integration. You can also subscribe to an MQTT topic. If you don't want to get into that at all, there is always the possibility to use one of the generic integrations to one of the IoT platforms which we work with, so that we can just like click on it and integrate with their services. So yes, some easy setups are possible. Something we're super excited about is the Things conference. I will just let it run for a couple of seconds. As a teaser, we have every year a conference. You see here some pictures of the virtual versions we had to have because of Corona throughout the last 2 years. But this year, in the end of September, we will have again a conference live and virtually. So we're super excited about that. And it really allows us to take and bring a small ecosystem with device makers, application server providers, but also companies like Connexin together to brainstorm, exchange, learn from one another, and allow anyone who wishes to start or explore LoRaWAN to have quick access to everyone who is a player in that ecosystem. So if you want to join, feel free to do so. We will leave some links in the chat, and for those who've registered, we will send some information after the webinar to you as well, including some additional information here from the webinar. So please, even if you're here via YouTube, feel free to use the registration form. My colleagues will post them in the chat as well. So it's please just register to get some additional information and perks out of the webinar. What is quite interesting, so far we have a quite like a LoRaWAN network server, which can do the basics of what we need for a LoRaWAN end-to-end application. However, what the challenges which come of operating such a huge network are definitely quite broad, and they start compounding as the network grows. There is a lot of features which enable scale within the ThinkStack cloud. At the ThinkStack in general, we will roll out our network operations center. You see here some first screenshots, which would allow you to monitor your network, see which gateways are up, how they are performing, how channels are utilized, and all of that will help you to design your network to be even more resilient and to detect issues before they come up. Device claiming is a great part. You can get a claiming feature with the ThinkStack Cloud, which will allow you here. This is one of our generic nodes. Distributors know how to use such the feature. So to onboard devices, make them claimable via the webcam feature or your via an API. So instead of having to add any keys or any configuration, you would simply scan the device and add it to it will be automatically added to your application. So it allows also for large scale deployment where maintenance staff could replace sensors easily, change batteries, expand an application. All of that comes in super handy there. Last but not least, again, we are not the forefront of the IoT application as such. As you have seen, we always integrate with an IoT platform or some of your custom applications, and that requires that you can control our solution with APIs. So every component you have seen has an API first approach. You can completely integrate what we do into your solution. And you can, of course, also, which comes in handy for bulk operations, use our command line interface. So you could easily script repetitive tasks, bulk tasks, etc. We're developing new functionality for that every release cycle. So we take on feedback, but all the basics are there. So we've seen great scripts which make operating such a system easy. Last but not least, Connexin, of course, sets up a large network. There might be other networks in the area. Roaming and peering becomes increasingly important in the LoRaWAN space. Packet broker, I don't want to go too much into detail here in this webinar. We have different content on that. But packet broker, just to mention it, would allow you to combine these advantages of a community network with citizen scientists, hobbyists, educators on there, people who build applications which add to the civil, to the community locally outside of commercial applications, and they could still roam with commercial private networks, which can ensure that their service level is at the level they would like it to have. How can you start? Like, all of this is not a big box gated. You could literally go on our website, find the ThinkStack Cloud. You can subscribe to the ThinkStack Discovery, which gives you access to the ThinkStack Cloud with discovery limits, but it's fully featured. You can add one gateway up to 10 devices and an integration and get started and get your hands on an end-to-end solution, yeah, within minutes, literally. So we're back here. Great. I will check quickly. Let me check if we have Andy joining us already. Andy is here, but I think we are still figuring out some technical parts. Andy is from Hull, so UK Council, which is already working with Connexin and LoRaWAN for a couple of time, for some time. So that would be really interesting to get over it. So now, Ralph, outlining the overall experience, what are the actionable steps? So now we have that task ahead. How would you go about it? Like, what are the to-dos on your list to roll out that project?
So the to-dos to roll out the project, I mean, I think what we always need to do first off is understand what the use case is for a particular project, because the use case will determine the number of gateways that you're going to need, and that will then determine the number of wayleaves that you need to get in place in order to put those gateways somewhere. So there's a huge amount of effort and activity that goes into the planning phase. And I know one of the questions is around, what sort of planning software is used. Well, we do use planning software. We actually use a couple of different types, which means that we can understand where, based on the signal strength and the possibility of where you can put gateways, that will enable us to show what that coverage is going to look like, and then that will determine how many gateways we need to order and how many we need to get wayleaves for, as I say, to put wherever they go onto lampposts, onto other street furniture, onto buildings, wherever it may be. So that is a really important step to make sure that that we do that. And there's other factors to consider as well. As I say, it depends on the use case. So some use cases require smaller gateways that are less costly, less powerful. Other use cases require more gateways because you've got to have coverage. And in the water meter example, you need to have actually a very dense network to be able to cope with getting the signal underground and making sure the spreading factor is correct and all of that kind of stuff. And other use cases, you just don't need such a dense network. So it really depends on what the project is, what the use case is, as to what that planning will be. But we will effectively go through all of that, make sure that it's right, roll it out, and have a process with the customer to ensure that we then have a period of fine-tuning it. And if we need to move a gateway here or there to another location in order to make sure that we've got better coverage, then that's what we'll do. Because at the end of the day, no customer is buying a LoRaWAN network. They're buying an outcome, which means they're buying the fact that we're promising to deliver data into a platform, either our platform or somebody else's platform, for them to do something with. So the technology enables that, and we will make sure that we tweak that to ensure that they've got the service that they're paying for, and that they can then drive actionable intelligence out of the data that's coming through the gateways.
Yeah, it's very interesting that they say that it requires an anchor use case to justify setting up such a network, and then you can grow the amounts of applications around that anchor use case in the existing network. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, and a rule of thumb, I know I get this question a lot. How many gateways do I need? And then somebody sends me a geolocation of some village in Germany, which is in the mountains. And before they open a tender or apply for a tender, they want to know how many gateways you need. So from your experience with the radio planning tools, what's the buffer you would add before you publish a tender, or before you make a recommendation to a customer on how many gateways they require?
So it's going to depend what the customer wants to pay. There's an economics question here. It's not just about the technology and the number of gateways. You could put one gateway up for one sensor, but that's going to be a significant cost per year for that data to transfer across the network. So again, it's going to depend on the use case. If we are doing a deployment of water meters, and yes, there will be a threshold below which we would advise that AMR metering continues, because that's probably going to be the most cost-effective thing for the water company to do. And then at the point at which they have enough density of meters that they want to connect to gateways, well, then we can move across to AMI, I should say. And the beauty of the Itron water meters, and we partner with Itron, is that their Cybel 5 meters are broadcasting AMR and AMI at the same time. So if you can't connect your water meter via AMI, you can do drive-by readings on AMR. So that's why that's a perfect solution in this scenario. So it's really, really difficult to say what the cutoff is, because if we're talking about a solution which is around, I don't know, sensors that are monitoring in buildings to try and keep the elderly and the frail living independently in their homes for as long as possible, because that's actually better for them, their mental, their physical health. It's better for their families. It's better for the state, because it's quite expensive. It's like £45,000 to £75,000 a year to have somebody out of their own home in the care system that it costs the government. So if we can ensure that people are in their own homes for as long as possible, through the use of brilliant smart technology, using LoRaWAN, using sensors, etc., then that's a really good thing. But there you're talking about a different kind of a model, where you could in fact be using indoor sensors rather than outdoor sensors. So the project and the use case will determine what that threshold is in terms of the number of water meters or sensors that you need to have per gateway in order to work to the right kind of budget level that the client is looking for across the lifetime of their contract. And remember that with the water companies, they're looking at this and going, well, we want to make sure that we've got this for the lifetime of the water meter battery, 12 to 15 years. So it's it's looking at it from a very long-term perspective, whereas other use cases could be much shorter, and therefore you've got I don't know, more money that could be put into that area for a shorter time, and therefore the number of sensors or meters per gateway will be very different. So it's really, really difficult to give you an exact answer.
Yeah. No, I can see that, and I tried to incorporate also Alexei's question, who is like, yeah, are you using any modeling software for signal strength? For example, multifamily high-rising building, let's say 50 floors, right? So that's exactly what you were saying. It very much depends on what type of building that is, how is it constructed, what other radio signals are around. So yeah, you gain some experience, some local experience, and we see that as well, that it's very valuable to have local partners who have made their own experiences and gained that skill on not only doing the radio modeling by software, but also like accounting for any local specifics and helping the customer to determine if it's a business case or not. Yeah, I think it is quite interesting that LoRaWAN does have comparably cheap sensors, but then we're looking at such long-term projects that, yeah, it is not a cheap commodity which you throw out after 2 years, right? Like it is something which has to be very resilient and persist through the lifetime of an application. So if a council said, okay, yeah, we actually have and we struggle with for example, housing for elderly, we would like to reduce the amount of people who have to go into the care system. Same for council housing. Do they approach you first before they start a tender, or what is the typical process on such a project?
It's really interesting. I spent the last couple of days at a local government partner network event and a similar event back in November. And many of the people, they come up to me and they say, we know we need to do something, we're just not quite sure what it is yet. Can you help us define the strategy? They've got large companies coming to them. You've got big IoT platforms. You can probably guess who the big players are out in the market, household names, that are going to them and saying, we'll provide you with a platform, just like we did in Aberdeen, just like we did elsewhere, because that's what you need. And they're sitting there going, well, I don't know that that is what I need. I need to define my digital strategy first. And actually what I say to them is, yes, you need to define a digital strategy clearly, because that's an important thing across the whole council or local authority, whatever it happens to be. But actually, let's look at it first from what are the pain points that you're trying to solve. I say you don't need to buy an IoT platform. What you need to do is to buy the ability to get insane amounts of intelligence out of data that enable you to drive an outcome. If you can drive that outcome, you can show a positive business case. If we can do that with you, then we can effectively provide you with all the visualization and the analytics and the correlation of different data sets. And you can see that, you can see how it enables you to do different things. And guess what? Once you've done that once, you already have the platform, because it's on that platform that we're visualizing all of that and enabling you to do that. And so you then layer in additional elements, additional data sets, whether those be from gateways, from sensors that are coming across the LoRaWAN network, or data that's coming from the internal systems of an organization. And then we work with them to say, well, what is it that you want to be able to cross-reference? And what if we could take this bit of data, and if we could cross-reference it and correlate it with that bit of data, what would it mean? What could we actually drive out of it and see? So we prefer to talk to the council about what they're trying to achieve, and then work with them to make sure that something that is right for them is being delivered, rather than simply responding to tenders. In general, a tender has probably been influenced by somebody they've already been talking to. Mm-hmm. So answering lots of cold tenders is a big time drain, and doesn't necessarily net you very much. So having the conversations, working out what the organization wants, how it's going to change things for their communities, their individuals, the residents that they're there to look after, that's the best way to engage in order to give them something that's really meaningful.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely agreed. And do you see that? So now you have worked worked for that recognition to be that go-to company who can be a partner who is actually not trying to sell the most expensive platform, but trying to figure out what is the business case of the application, and if it's viable, you're not connected to. You're not forced to use LoRaWAN or a specific technology or a specific solution. Do you see any influence on local communities, for example, community networks that they've already done the first capacity building? Do you see differences in how, let's say, tech savvy or LoRaWAN savvy councils are? Or is this more of it's different people you are talking to and deliberating these type of questions with?
I mean, some cities are more advanced than others. Some towns are more advanced than others. So what we're typically finding is that the conversations that we're having, the organizations are saying, we've run a pilot over here, we've got some data over there, we've been looking at this, but we're not quite sure how to knit it all together. Now, in one instance, what we've been able to say is, well, look, we've got a LoRaWAN that's in place in your area today. It's being used by our customers. Actually, you can make use of that now. Get your, the sensors, the pilots that you've been running in various different places. Let's help you to actually have a transport mechanism that's going to be a single transport mechanism, enterprise grade, with all the elements that are there, because this is, clearly really important to make sure that it's safe, secure, is always delivered and all that kind of stuff. So, that's the enterprise grade network piece. And that we can take those different pilots and data sets and aggregate them into our platform so that they can suddenly start to see what that data can do for them. What does it mean if they correlate it? So the majority of conversations are sort of early-ish stage. They may have done some things so far, but they've not done a huge amount. Now, we know that there are some local authorities in London, for example. There's the South London Partnership, which is the likes of Merton, Croydon, Kingston, Richmond, and one or two others I'm probably forgetting, where they've come together and they are reasonably advanced compared to other areas. And so they've kind of got solutions in place already. And so we'll focus on the areas where we can make the most impact for organizations that haven't yet really struck out on that journey in a truly meaningful way, and we want to work out how to help them do that.
Great. Yeah, great. So to sum up a little bit, until now, so you were saying councils typically know that they have a problem, they want to resolve it. Sometimes it alienates a little bit from having a specific problem by then looking at available solutions, and then these solutions kind of alter a little bit what they want, right? Like, so, oh yeah, there's this great IoT platform, so we can do also this business, this application. All of that is possible. But then it's really important to go in, stay true to the original problem, which sparked, let's say, their interest, and when they started exploring what solutions are out there. Be lean, focus on the core business cases, and it's usually easy to expand, but it's quite hard to buy in the heavy hitters and then try to make it a business case later. That applies as for software as much as we were saying about planning your radio network. So how many gateways do I need? What devices do I use? What spreading factors do I use? I see that there were questions about what spreading factors are achieving below ground meter chambers. It's again like it's very individual. So trying it out, and it's very much depends what type of gateway antenna you're using and how close it is. So there goes a lot of experience into it before, let's say, making your core problem into a digital strategy, and from there plan what technical setup would be part of implementation of that digital strategy. I'm like, we are here in the Netherlands, I'm from Germany. Is it always required to then go into a tender process, or do they have, let's say, budgets allocated already where they can then use to implement such projects?
So with public sector organizations, unless you're talking about really small projects, you are going to have to go through a tender process of some sort. And certainly with the water companies, you're talking about really large projects. So they absolutely are regulated. They use the OJU tender framework. Yes, tenders are things that we need to respond to just like everybody else. And that's the white knuckle ride when you get to the end and you put your best and final in, and you're hoping that you've done everything you need to. And so far so good, which is great. But yeah, there's a lot of work to be done right up front, because quite a lot of people just don't really understand what is LoRaWAN, what can it do for them, what is the art of the possible within IoT. So there's a whole education piece, which is part of the conversation, and trying to tease out what they're trying to achieve and how and why, then establishing that you've got credibility, you know how to do this because you've done it in Hull and Sheffield and Coventry and Newcastle and wherever else, and all the different projects that we have done. And then making sure that it's the right business case and that they see us as the right technology partner to work with for the long term. Yeah,
no, absolutely agreed. Yeah, it's tougher. Tender processes, it's lengthy as well. So what do you say is like the average time between starting a conversation of, hey, we have that problem, to actually getting the contracts signed?
So on the big tender processes, we're talking 9 months, maybe something like that. And there's iteration after iteration. Just request for interest, request for information, request for proposal, and then however many rounds of bests and finals, or not quite final because they're going to ask for another best and final. So there's that process to go through. So they can be quite lengthy, and it therefore requires a lot of effort, attention, investment on our part in the selling cycle, the solutioning cycle, as well as the investment in the infrastructure, because that's what we are. If you look at us from a fiber perspective, we build infrastructure which connects people. From an IoT point of view, we build LoRaWAN networks which connect things, and then we build the platform which enables things data to be for the magic to happen within the platform, right? So it is quite a human capital and monetary capital investment heavy exercise to do this, but it just makes sense to do. There is so much opportunity that is out there to help elevate communities and individuals within those communities by utilizing smart technology.
Yeah. Before we go down into how to actually build and operate such a system, then after we've won that tender, do you, because you mentioned it again, do you think Corona or COVID and the current global situation, is it actually harmful, or does it actually fuel the need for IoT and that we should be acting on now?
So, I mean, I think COVID slowed a lot of things down, and we certainly have seen things pick up quite significantly. But to be honest, I think that the use of smart technology is something which people are going to be adopting more and more of. The reality is that everybody is using IoT in some form or fashion, right? If you've got a mobile phone, funnily enough, it's an internet connected device. If you're using a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or whatever it happens to be, we're all using it. And the question is how to enable the adoption of that in a more wide scale way. Part of the issue in the UK market is it's very fragmented. And so while you can show the map, which shows the number of devices connected on TTI's network, it's a group of lots of different people and organizations with different projects. And that's great because you've got that community and you've got the ability for people to connect to gateways. But there isn't a provider like you could, if you want a mobile phone in the UK, you know that you're going to go to Vodafone or you're going to go to O2 or 3 or EE, right? So you know who they are. If I were to say to you in the UK market, you know, who's the LoRaWAN provider? It's like, well, okay, it kind of depends where you are. And so that we're on a mission to enable that technology so that anyone anywhere can connect any kind of device to a reliable enterprise grade network to get the data, and then we challenge them to dream. You know, we actually had somebody that works with us who's a leader in lateral thinking and innovation, and he said a few weeks ago, he said, you know what, IoT, it doesn't stand for Internet of Things, it stands for Innovate Our Thinking, because it's by innovating our thinking about what the art of the possible is that we start to get more adoption out for the benefit of society, the benefit of individuals, communities, and the organizations that are supporting them. So, yeah, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah, I really enjoy, we have community meetups with local communities, as you were saying, and a lot of them start with showing what the community members have been tinkering and developing with, right? And while, yeah, the business case is the, let's say, boring temperature sensor in a smart facility context where you have like hundreds of thousands across like a really large fleet of buildings. Or a group of buildings, but then it's innovation starts small, and it's interesting that also the LoRaWAN device maker market and ecosystem has gone through that process. So the low-hanging fruit has been conquered quite early on there for these like simple use cases with very resilient and very well designed devices. But now the variety we have of different sensors, which are industrial grade, which are ready to be deployed in big quantities, has grown so much, and we can see that, and that's why I'm very much looking forward to see everyone also in Amsterdam in September, just because there they come together and show what is new, right? Like you've seen the device wall of fame where you can actually see the prototypes. I very much agree. It's great, and it's good to see that you also see the need of, okay, let's allow for the platform, let's allow for innovation, for dreaming, while we provide a solid service on the basics, which is building a network. So now you've rolled out, let's say you've installed the devices, that's your bread and butter to build network infrastructure, you have the devices, there are problems, there is maintenance involved. What are your, like, any surprises in that, or is this all very classical maintenance of network infrastructure for Connexin?
I mean, it is what we do for a living with our, fiber networks. So we do the same for our LoRaWAN network too. Our engineers are trained to be able to cope with both types of technology, and so. If there are issues within the network, it kind of depends where that issue is. We'll do the troubleshooting first. Is it your issue on the network server, right? Or is it our issue on a bit of hardware? Or could it be that in the water meter environment, you've actually got a lorry that's parked over the chamber where the water meter is, so actually there is no reading happening. So there are lots of things that could be an issue. We troubleshoot to find out where that issue is, what the root cause is, and then we'll do just traditional maintenance. It's that break fix. We'll replace things that don't work, because our obligation to our customer is to provide them with essentially the ability for the data to get from somewhere to somewhere else. And actually they don't really mind how it's done as long as it gets done. And that's our job to make sure that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I don't know if you've seen our content before, right? Like in the Spring Global Conference, I had a session with Adrian, an engineer and developer of ours, and he's a strong advocate to rather use more gateways and use the benefit of signal strength, therefore battery capacity, and have a more resilient network. So rather invest up front than keep the operational costs up. Would you sign that, or to have to send him to you for an internship?
Well, certainly if you've got more gateways up, you will have more coverage. And if there should be an issue with one gateway, then another gateway is going to be picking up the signal, and therefore, everything works. But of course, the more gateways you have up, the more capital, intensive it is to put the network up in the first place. And again, it depends on the use case. In order to get the signal, so I think one of the questions was about signal strength to underground chambers. The reality is you can on SF12 you can get the signal to the underground chamber, to the water meter, but your battery life is going to be shocking. Clearly, if you were just broadcasting on SF2, which nobody would ever do because you'd have the most dense network and it's just, it's just going to be too much capex, then everything's going to get connected all the time. So there's a sort of space between which there's an optimum level, which is around the technical deployment of the network, but also the commercial aspects of it. Clearly, the denser the network you have that you roll out first time around, then the better opportunity there is to service any use case that comes along after that, right? So in the areas where we are doing water metering, because by nature, by definition, it's got to be a dense network, well, that means that actually you throw any other use case at us in the same area, we're going to be able to cope with it. If you have a less dense network, then you're probably going to need to fill in the blanks, fill in the holes, densify it at some point. Then there becomes a question of whether you're talking, about also having to move the existing gateways or just put other ones in place, and it becomes a little bit more complicated. So you're absolutely right. If you can, make it as dense as possible, but that comes at a cost, and that cost has to be balanced with the use case and the budget of a client.
Yeah. Great. So summarizing here as well, like every change to the networks comes with an overhead, while the initial costs are, of course, there. So it's always an engineering, a design decision on how dense it is, but preferably denser than not so dense. That's where also we see peering come in as well, right? Like if there is multiple networks in one area, I know in Germany there are a few use cases which show that and showcase that they actually can use the increase the density of each network by enabling roaming and peering between those networks. And it's a quite interesting case, and I'm looking forward to see this effect joining. And that's also, I think, answering Jose's question that peering between private networks, but also with the community, is always some use case, and there's always a business case to make, and it's a conversation to have. I think it's a learning curve for the local councils and with the communities. And please do reach out to either of us to have this conversation. It's always possible. Let's also see here some questions on the on certifications we have on our website. We will write down your name and contact you if you have shot us an email. If not, send us an email again and we can look into it. We don't want to rob you of your learning achievements and your medal that you've earned. With that, there were a lot of technical questions I think we've covered with penetration, spreading factors, etc. Last but not least, Ralph, what are you looking in partners like us who provide managed software services? Is that what is important there to look out for?
Well, so this Severn Trent project is the first project that we're working on together with you. We have a number of LoRaWAN networks elsewhere. We have used somebody else. I won't name them on this call, but we decided to work with you guys on this particular project because you just offered us so much flexibility, attention. We looked at the capability, we looked at, just so many different factors. And I say we, that's the royal we, it's actually my technical team. So I don't take any credit for it at all. But they did a huge amount of work to look at, who was providing the best partnership service, because it's not just about the technical service at all. And I think we have a really great relationship with you, which is easy. We've got open access to communicate well. The other week, Vinka came and met with me and my team in London. We, just basically shot the breeze for an hour and a half talking about all sorts of things because it's important to you guys, it's important to us. So, you know, and there are all the other factors you would imagine, you know, from deep technical understanding, the commercial elements, the other services that you have as wraparound. But we felt that this was a really significant project. It's significant for Severn Trent because it's a huge rollout for them. It's actually the first large-scale AMI water meter rollout in the UK. So it's a significant thing for the industry, and it's a really significant thing for us. And the fact that we chose to work with you hopefully makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, because it's testament to the technical and commercial and partnership aspects of the journey we've been on with you.
No, absolutely. And I mean, you've seen after the Corona lockdowns, Vinke was on our CEO was on one of his first trips after those times, coming to meet you and discuss it. And that's exactly, we do understand that we will not start having local teams on the ground. We're a global company. We operate on 4 continents, right? Like that, it's very difficult to have this vertical capacity. We don't want that. We need local partners. We want local partners, and we're super happy about the collaboration and cooperation with Connexin. And we hope to have way more projects together soon. I think, keeps us warm and fuzzy, as you said, for sure. I'm glad you could report today a little bit on the almost royal service you're providing to local communities and infrastructure and network technologies. What we will do is, for everyone who participated in the webinar, I will go through it with our colleagues, and we will make it a bit of an actionable step-on-step. What were the learnings from it, which we will send to everyone who has been registered for the webinar. Having said that, the registration form is still open. So if you've just been notified by YouTube that something is going on, please do click on the registration link. It will help us to send you summarized, boiled down version of the webinar. We will also attach some email addresses and contacts so you can reach us and start the conversations. To say it in Ralph's words, start innovating IoT is, what did he say?
Innovate our thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Innovate our thinking. That's where it starts. And then we can go into the hard work and straightforward work of building business cases, realizing them and operating them, ideally for decades or at least 1 decade to deliver value to local communities. Thank you very much, Ralph, for coming. It's a bit of a pity that we couldn't have Andy joining. There were a bit of technical issues in the background. We will see how we can get his feedback into the material we will be sending out. It was a pleasure having you here. We're very much looking forward to the cooperation on rolling out this project. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and you can enjoy the end of your day.
Great. Thank you very much for having me.